Welcome to Third Phase of Moon. My name's Blake Cousins. Now get ready for the start of an amazing journey. The largest YouTube channel is now on the largest civilian-run radio station, Third Phase of Moon Radio with researchers on a mission. Host Dr. J. Andy Elias and best-selling author, MUFON investigator Preston Dennett are about to take you on all the rides of our lives. We'll be taking UFO news, interviewing top researchers. The journey begins now. Third Phase of Moon Radio is officially on air. Without further ado, here comes Third Phase of Moon, researchers on a mission.
We welcome you back to Third Phase of Moon Radio. We have an amazing show for you today. Back, we have Yvonne Smith, the world-renowned hypnotherapist who has helped literally hundreds of people deal with the trauma associated with alien abduction. Ms. Smith, how are you?
I'm good, John. Thank you for having me on the show.
It's always a pleasure to have you because you are really one of the largest researchers in this field, and you have paved the way for so many people following your path. And the people that you've been helping, one of the prominent cases around the entire globe right here is the Thomas Reed case involving the entire family. And joining us today live, we have with us Thomas Reed. Mr. Reed, how are you this evening?
Oh, very good. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. The pleasure is ours. Now, your case is very complex. I mean, it involves decades. It involves your family. It even touches politics to a sense with your father, with the UN. I mean, there's just so much to it. The listeners out there, if you've heard Thomas Reed's name, you would know what we're talking about. If you haven't, you're in for one great surprise. And I guess the logical place is to start. When was the first encounter? In the 60s, I guess, would be the decade to begin with.
Well, our case with my brother and I, the one that really had gotten most of the attention, if you will, was Sheffield, Massachusetts. That was where my family owned a little restaurant, which oddly enough is still there today. It's called Village on the Green. And that's at 113 Main Street, to give you an idea how small the town was. And we had, or my parents, mother, had a horse farm. And it was a pretty good-sized house once she bought it. The house was actually called the Boardman Street house on Boardman Street. It was 80 acres or so, and she had horses and that sort of thing. And, we had, over about a 4-year span, we had 3 accounts that were witnessed by many, and 66, 67, and 1969. And it was later on given a Hynek rating indirectly over via an account that took place at Juggin Resort. That was a lot of witnesses gave testimony, and it was given a Hynek rating, that sort of thing. And later on in the 80s, it was investigated again by attorney Robert Bleckman, who, oddly enough, organized a symposium at the United Nations with the help of Mohammed Ramadan, who was head of the Parapsychology Society within the United Nations. And a lot of people were there. Stanton Friedman was there, Linda Morton Howe, quite a few. And our case was kind of mentioned on the back side of that due to my father's pillar standing, if you will. And so that was really the earlier part of it. And to be honest with you, a lot of it we really kind of thought just went by the wayside. And then in 2009, my brother had an account. We kind of both did 40 years later. And that really refueled everything and caused a lot of people to look into it.
In your accounts, did you have conscious recall of the events, or did you require hypnotic regression to acquire the memories or to get them back?
Well, to be honest with you, I actually took my horse a day or so after the experience that we had on the farm, and I actually rode up to where I had remembered, if you will, or recalled where this took place maybe a few days earlier. Maybe it could have been a week earlier. I don't know. I was pretty young. I was like 7. And I found this large rock that I remembered seeing and this wishbone tree, and I found the spot where this was, and I had never been there before consciously. So this was just within a week, I knew where it was. I knew where it happened. I mean, this has all been a conscious recall. My brother and mother and even my grandmother and I and my stepfather, Howard, we talked about this our whole lives, and we just were tight-lipped about it because my father actually ran for office. He was actually ran the Democratic ticket. He was backed by Senator Christopher Dodd. I've had coffee at the governor's mansion to give you an idea why we didn't talk about this kind of thing. And then after my father's passing in 2006, I just felt it was time. And then, of course, with my brother's case, and which really got a lot of press, it was just the time to go forward with it. And if nothing else, to kind of pay it forward to my father for stepping out and trying to do something on his end, something. He had a voice, so he would have been able to really get it out and get people listening. So, but no, I really, to be honest with you, Yvonne was at my house last week, if she wants to comment on it, and that was really the first time that I really gave it a shot, this regression thing, and I really wasn't sure it would work. I'm one of those people that just, I just was hesitant about it, I guess, for my own. I was nervous about it. Maybe I didn't want to remember it. I don't know. It was just a funny feeling I had, and I think she was pretty patient with me. But I actually went down a road. Oddly enough, I remembered something I never recalled before, and it was really bothered me. She'll probably comment on it, but
well, one thing I want to throw out for everybody out there is that you, Thomas Reed, you have had every reason not to tell the story, but you told it because you wanted the truth to get out there and people who had similar experiences to be able to relate. Correct? You didn't have a motive. You didn't want to sell a book. You didn't want your father to tarnish your career any way. You had every reason not to say it, but you wanted it for the reason of helping people and for the truth.
Well, the truth is exactly that. Just to touch on this, our case actually was mentioned on the backside in 1992 on October 2nd at the United Nations, and my father was actually killed on the same day, 14 years later after voicing the book project. And Robert Bleckman also passed about a year later, and our doctor died 8 weeks after going public. So, if anything, I'm speaking out because my brother and I feel that my father deserves that. My father deserves us to go forward and try to finish what he started. That is really the bottom line. As far as the truth being told, yeah, I think that's really important. Unfortunately, I don't think enough people listen. I think that it's, shows like yours and others that are trying to get attention to this, and for the right reasons. I commend you. That's what we're trying to do as well. But I lost my father over it, and that's really the driving force behind what I do.
Well, if you're touching one person out there, and we're a part of that, that's what our goal is. Ultimately, we want more than one person out there, but if anybody out there is listening, tune in if you've shared such an experience, because listen to what this man has to say. It's very profound. The experience he's gone through has shaped him. And the next thing I want to get to with Yvonne, as we bring you in to comment on this, Yvonne has helped several people through her organization, Zero International, Close Encounters Research Organization. But now I want to direct this back to Thomas Reed and Yvonne with your experiences with him. I wanted two questions. Yvonne, first, conscious recall. This is not something that's very common in alien abduction, right? And for Mr. Reed to have it sets him apart from several other cases. And the next thing I wanted you to comment on and tell us about is walk us through the hypnosis that you went through with Mr. Reed this last week.
Well, actually, conscious recall is pretty common among experiencers. They don't walk away from it with a completely blank mind. The purpose, they'll have some bits and pieces of memory, and it just depends on some will have more conscious memory than others, but the subconscious mind job is to protect us when we go through a trauma, so it will block out portions of the event. But this is what brings people like Tom to me, because they know something very strange happened. They're not sure, but they also know that, especially in Tom's case, when we have the multiple witness abduction cases, the family members begin to talk among themselves and ask each other, do you remember, such and such? But another strange element of this is many times the family members don't even talk about it till years later. So, but they do have conscious memory, and what brings someone to me is that they finally want to know what happened. They want to know the truth. They want to know if they're crazy. I've heard this over and over again. So what Tom experienced, of course, is one of the better documented cases, because he had family members with him, and then he's got all the documents. He spoke for CIRO, our support group, several years ago, and we're going to have him back at some point to speak for CIRO International, which is a spin-off, a branch of CIRO. He puts on a very nice presentation. Tom and I also spoke at the McMinnville conference, I believe that's a couple years ago. But I'll let Tom talk about his, to see how much he wants to talk about his hypnosis experience. But what he went through during his session is something that I experience with people on a daily basis.
One of the great things I love about the case is that on top of the conscious recall, how it extends on different generations, and it's been profiled in very many different places. I remember hearing the name initially just by searching, Googling alien abduction. Then again, when we had Kathleen Martin, Denise Stoner on, and then recently when you two were together, and it was even profiled in a book recently. And there was this one drawing of this insect-like creature, and I remember the big part of it was the way its legs were. It kind of sat like it made an M, and it had this giant sack. Can you describe the different creatures and walk us through that particular experience?
Is this for me or for Yvonne?
For you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, what my family, what we ran across or saw or had an experience with what we believe to be two different type of entities, if you will. The one that looked more human to us, it was still more human than what most people would probably see on the internet or reference as the common terminology, I guess, would be a gray. That looked very human to me in a lot of respects, and a small, frail. And then there was the what we believe to be, and again, this is our assumption. I don't know. I'm no expert, but it looked to be a combination of perhaps some type of gene manipulation or something, a combination of different insects, and it had looked to have human hands. It had an insect-type body, legs of maybe a spider or an ant. It had the head of an ant, actually. It was about 4.5 feet tall, I believe. I was younger, so I try not to. It looked bigger to me as a child and quite terrifying, actually. But it, again, I'm not trying to blow it out of proportion, but I'd say this thing was about 3 feet. The legs, 3 feet. Body was a couple feet taller than that. It had a head shape similar to a football or an ant, and it looked to lower and raise itself between maybe 4 feet and 6 feet through its stance. My brother remembers it being much taller than I do. I'm sorry, no, my brother remembered it being shorter than I do. And we thought for that reason that maybe it lowered itself because my brother was shorter and I was taller. But again, it had like, to describe it to you, legs very stick-like, like pencils maybe, and it had rings on it. It looked like it had like purple ring going around it. And it had like a sack or like a teardrop body and a very long neck. And again, it had a head much larger than twice the size of a football, but shaped very similar to that. And I just recently had an illustrator put together a 3D image of it, which I can probably send you later, which is okay. But it hangs in Roswell, actually. I drew it when I was, to tell you how I first drew this thing, after an experience that we had in 1969 in the station wagon, which our whole family saw this craft over or inside some shrubs and trees up above the left side of their car. And it was very traumatizing for the whole family, which is where we saw this thing. Later on, I actually sketched it. My first day of 4th grade, I had gone into my class, and there were a lot of sketches from children from the year before on the back wall underneath the chalkboard, and they had these green men from Mars and all this kind of thing. And I stood in the doorway, and I spoke to my teacher before I would take my seat. And she asked me, my name, blah, 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 why am I late? 'Cause I actually was late for my first day of school, 4th grade. And I said they're not green and they're not from Mars. And I had sketched a couple of things which also hung on the back wall of this classroom. And several of them actually are hung in not the museum, but the library, the Roswell Library today. And so this thing that I sketched, I actually drew it when I was 9, maybe 10, 9 or 10. And it stuck with me this whole time. And just over the past few years, I've started running into professional illustrators and that sort of thing that have tried to help me bring this to life. So with the help of my brother and I, we sat down, and what we believe, when we look at it, it puts a chill down our back. So we know that, between the two of us, we have some differences in what it looked like. My brother thinks it was a little bit shorter, that kind of thing. But all in all, it's very accurate to what we saw. And this is a real thing. It looked like it had almost human hands, larger human hands. Again, it was a combination of different insects maybe and some human characteristics. It was very, very weird looking. It was very, very difficult to look at. When I saw it, I ran into a hallway. But anyway, to give you an idea of the color too, the head of it was more like a goldish copper, maybe, from what I remember. And the body itself, the neck and going down towards the legs, was more like an off-white, a dirty white, a dirty and black white with purplish rings on it.
How many different species were on board? You said there was 2, right? How many of this insect-like were there versus how many of the grays were on during that experience? I mean, did this seem to be like the one in charge?
I couldn't really tell you that. I can tell you the scenario. I was in a room. Actually, I was in a large open bay area. It was probably the size of 4 football fields. When I looked ahead of me, it was all basically just empty and black. At least it felt that way to me. I saw a light ahead of me. At this point, I usually, the times when a couple of years beforehand, if I can back up for a second, I felt very engaged in something. I felt like I was going along, not willingly, but I was doing it anyway. It was very hard to describe why I would cooperate, for lack of a better word. And this, I was very, very clear-minded. I wasn't, whatever this was that had taken, but I used to think that there was, I still do, think that there's a low-frequency ELF that kind of puts you in type of a state, and you're kind of controlled through that. I didn't feel that this time. I was very alert. And I was very nervous to walk ahead to this person who was, or E.T. or whatever it was. It looked very, very human-like, actually, like a small human with large, maybe lenses or something on its face. But it was more human than most people would describe. And I walked towards it. I was grabbed very harshly on my left arm, and I was taken out this room. I took it, went down a hallway just in front of that, or through that door. And it was very bright, high walls. I don't remember the light bleeding in, which is something my brother and I talk about a lot. It looked like where it was light, where it was dark, it was dark. And these walls, if I remember correctly, looked to be about, today, being older, I think, okay, maybe not quite that tall, but maybe like 15 or 20 feet high. They were tall walls, and it was very white, very luminous, almost like a glow stick. And it went down to the end of this hallway, which was not that far, maybe, I'm going to say 30, 40 feet maybe. And it came to a T. I was taken to a left and immediately into a room off to the right. And there was a wall in there that bowed inward. It was almost like a can. And on the side of this large bowed-in room, which is probably 25 feet wide, 25 feet deep, there was these 2, I call them, I guess, insect beings off to the left. And they were in this little pocket area, and they were staring at a wall. They were just within feet of it, just looking directly into whatever it was they were doing. They seemed to be very occupied in this screen that might have been into this wall. I don't remember any of that. I don't know what they were staring at, but there were 2 of them side by side. And I was towards the back of this room, and behind me there was a figure which was more, I guess I'll use the word gray because that's really what people reference them as. And then towards the bottom of this table that I was actually sitting on, it was low. I wasn't lying on it at this point. I was sitting on it. And there were a couple at the foot of this table near the wall, maybe 10 feet from me. And when this thing had turned around, this insect, whatever it is, had turned its head, I, instead of running out to the left, which is where I came in, I actually took a a longer route away from everyone, and I ran up the right side of this pocket, which were bowed inward, and I ran into a hallway. And it was huge. It was you had 3 intersecting halls into this large circular room or a circular hallway. And it, when I say huge, I mean, when I ran into this thing, it was like running into a basketball court with no bleachers. I mean, it was that big. You could drive cars to this thing. And there were 2 hallways that almost formed a Y. To my right, on the same side of this hallway as I was, there was a hallway that went out, which you could, it was like 2 car lengths wide, and then the same thing off to my right, off to the right side, and then off to my left, it was like a 4-lane highway. And this whole room actually bowed outward in between these other adjoining hallways. It was huge. And I was immediately taken back in because I didn't know where to go. I heard voices, though. I heard my mother. I believe I heard my mother. My mother said she was yelling out, and I heard voices, so maybe I want to remember it as being her, but for my sake of mind, I believe that to have been her. And I was taken back into this room, and I was placed on this table. It was white, like a whitish silver, and it wasn't that high off the floor because I was only 10, maybe 9 or 10 at this time, so I could slide right up on it. So it was pretty low, and I laid down on this thing. And this piece came over me. It almost looked like a tanning bed cover, or it was oval, and it had like a cage inside of it. It looked like it had an intersection of a cage that moved. And I thought when this thing came over me, it was to keep me from running. That's really what I thought it was. I thought it was to just keep me in place. But this cage thing loosened a little bit, and when this thing finally came over my body, I could actually see underneath it. I could even see my feet, the whole thing. And it had holes on the side of it, like ovals or circles. And there were things placed on my body through these hands that came in through this cage type thing, and they looked like raisins, large raisins, and I think they were on a pad of some sort. I can't remember exactly, but I used to reference them as rocks, but I don't think that's a really a fair analogy. I think they were more like a packet of something, or like a dark raisiny black packet, and they were about the size of smaller than a golf ball. And so I remember that, and then I was brought back into this room, and next thing I was back in the station wagon with my family, who all remembered something a little bit differently. And my grandmother was in the middle of the road. I remember seeing her. My mother was driving, actually, and now she was in the passenger seat, and she was not aware. She was not responding to me calling to her. My brother was curled up in the fetal position. He was on the right side of me. And my grandmother was about 3 or 4 car lengths ahead of the car in the middle of the road. I used to use the word, walking aimlessly, because she didn't seem to have a direction where she was going. And so I got out. I called her, Nana, what I called her. And I went up to her, and she had just before I got to her, she walked into like a hardware store. They sold bikes, room bikes, those little things, and baby carriages and stuff. And she got caught up in these carriages and so on in the back of the store, and I tried to grab her hand to come with me, and she was really preoccupied with this baby carriage, I guess, and stroller, I guess it was actually. And finally she came back out and kind of teared up, going back to the car, and my mother was awake at that point, and my brother, I don't remember him being conscious at that time, but and that was really a good snapshot of what happened in 1969. But we all remember different parts of it, and this insect thing, I don't know what else to refer to it as. I guess that's the best way to word it, but my brother remembers it vividly, and as I do. We just remember it a little bit differently, but we're going to have differences, but for the most part, we think we've nailed it with the sketch that we have. I mean, it's as close as we can come. I mean, it's a combination of his thoughts and feelings and mine, and we think we have a very good image of a real life insect type creature that not many people have seen, I don't think. But then again, I get a lot of emails from people that say that's what I saw, but so maybe it will help. Maybe it will help bring other people to discuss, experiences that they've had with a similar type of a being, if you will.
Well, that sketch you have is very eerie, and I'm sure all people will be able to find it. We'll be talking about that right when we get back to some break, as well as much, much more with Ron Smith and Thomas Reed. Everybody stay tuned. Right back.
unidentified flying object.
Third phase of moon.